I found the faded photograph tucked inside my mother's old Bible, and the face staring back was my neighbor, Mr. Schmidt. He was younger, in a uniform, standing at the gates of a place my parents only whispered about. My hands trembled so hard I nearly dropped the picture. I had to know if it was really him. My grandson's school project on family history led me to these boxes, but now it felt like a ghost had walked into my living room. I needed to confirm this before my memory failed me or he realized I knew. It threatened the peace I'd built over 60 years, the safe life I thought I had. Mr. Schmidt watered his roses every morning, always waving with that gentle smile. I forced myself to smile back from the window, my heart pounding. Later, I searched online for old camp records, my fingers clumsy on the keyboard. The page loaded slowly, and there he was, listed as a doctor at Auschwitz. I closed the laptop, my breath caught in my throat. What do you do when the monster lives next door? I decided to visit the local archive to find more documents. My daughter thought I was researching genealogy, but I was hunting a war criminal. The archive was a quiet room, smelling of old paper, and I requested files from the post-war trials. The librarian, a young woman, helped me patiently. I found a testimony from a survivor describing Dr. Schmidt's experiments on twins, and my parents were twins. The words blurred as I read the details. It meant reliving their pain, the nightmares I thought were buried. Mr. Schmidt called my house to ask if I needed help with groceries, his voice friendly. I said no, my voice steady, but my hands were ice. On my way out, I spotted him across the street, watching the archive building. He nodded slowly, and for a second, his smile didn't reach his eyes. I hurried home, clutching the copies I'd made. That night, I hid them under my mattress, knowing I couldn't stop now. I needed to protect my family without alarming them. I wanted to gather enough evidence to take to the authorities, but quietly. I invited my son and his wife over for dinner, listening to their chatter while I scanned old newspapers on my tablet. It created a distance growing between us. I made excuses not to babysit my grandkids, afraid to draw attention. Mr. Schmidt left a basket of vegetables on my porch, a kind gesture that felt like a threat. While putting them away, I noticed a folded note tucked inside, a flyer for a neighborhood watch meeting he was organizing. It felt like he was circling closer. Later, I found an online forum for children of survivors and posted anonymously about my discovery. A user replied with a name, a researcher in Germany who tracks escaped Nazis. I emailed him, my heart racing. The reply came quickly. He was interested, but warned me to be careful. I deleted the email, my hands shaking. What if Mr. Schmidt was watching my online activity too? I met the researcher, Klaus, over a secure video call. He explained that Mr. Schmidt had changed his name after the war and slipped into the US with forged papers. Klaus needed solid proof to involve Interpol, so I agreed to help discreetly. I aimed to find physical evidence from Mr. Schmidt's house, but I'm no spy. The fear was constant every time I stepped outside. I started locking my doors even during the day. Mr. Schmidt knocked on my door, offering to fix a loose shutter, and I let him in, my skin crawling. He worked efficiently, humming an old tune my mother used to hate. While he was distracted, I glimpsed a small box on his shelf with military insignia. After he left, I called my lawyer to update my will, ensuring my children would inherit everything directly. That evening, I saw Mr. Schmidt burning papers in his backyard. The flames danced, and I knew time was running out. I decided to search his garbage on collection day, a desperate move for an old woman. At dawn, I slipped outside and sifted through his bin, finding shredded documents and a burned photo frame. I pieced together a fragment showing a camp barracks. I felt such shame digging through trash and the risk of being seen. Mr. Schmidt's curtain twitched, and I ducked behind my fence, my heart pounding. Later, I received a letter from the city about a zoning complaint against my property, filed anonymously. It felt like a warning. I visited the police station to ask about historical war crimes, but the officer said without concrete evidence, they couldn't act. On my way home, Mr. Schmidt approached me in the street, his eyes cold. "Some things are best left in the past, Eleanor," he said softly. I nodded, forcing a smile, but inside, I vowed to bring his past into the light. That night, I started a journal detailing everything, hiding it where my family would find it if anything happened to me. I bought a small security camera to point at my backyard, aiming to catch Mr. Schmidt if he burned more evidence. I wanted to document his actions without alerting him, but installing it made my hands shake. I'm not tech-savvy. It cost me my peace. Every noise at night made me jump, and I lied to my daughter about why I needed it. The tension from Mr. Schmidt grew when he offered to help me with my garden, his presence feeling like an inspection. While digging near the fence, I found a buried metal box, half rusted in my own flower bed. Inside were old photographs and a list of names, including my parents. My breath caught. That evening, the camera captured him, staring directly at it from his side of the fence before turning away. I knew he was onto me. I took the metal box to a safe deposit box at my bank, wanting to secure the evidence before anything happened. My hands trembled as I handed the key to the clerk. I felt like a thief in my own life. I ended up isolating myself from my grandchildren, afraid to put them in danger. Mr. Schmidt left a voicemail asking if I'd seen his missing gardening tools, his tone too casual. Later, I met my son for coffee, and he noticed my distraction. "Mum, you seem stressed," he said, but I brushed it off. On my way home, a car followed me slowly, and when I glanced back, it was Mr. Schmidt's sedan. He pulled up beside me at a stoplight and rolled down his window. "Eleanor, we need to talk about what you've taken," he said, his voice low. I drove straight to the police station, but they said it was a civil matter. That night, I found my cat hiding under the bed, scared. Someone had been in my house. I decided to contact the researcher Klaus again, hoping he could use the evidence from the box. I wanted to get official attention on Mr. Schmidt, but I feared my phone was tapped. I was filled with constant dread. I stopped sleeping well and lost weight. Mr. Schmidt filed a noise complaint against me with the building management, claiming my TV was too loud, a petty move to undermine me. While checking my mail, I found an envelope with no return address, containing a single photo of me leaving the archive. It was a clear warning. I called my lawyer to discuss restraining orders, but he said without proof of threats, it was difficult. That afternoon, my granddaughter visited, and Mr. Schmidt waved to her from his porch. She waved back, and I felt a chill. I pulled her inside, my heart racing. What if he targeted my family next? I started documenting everything in a journal I kept in a fireproof lockbox, aiming to create a record for my children. I wanted to ensure they'd understand if something happened to me. But writing down the details made the memories fresh and painful. The emotional toll was heavy. I cried after each entry, remembering my parents' suffering. The situation with Mr. Schmidt intensified when he began hosting neighborhood gatherings, excluding me, and people started giving me odd looks. At the grocery store, a neighbor asked if I was causing trouble for poor Mr. Schmidt. I smiled and said nothing, but inside, I seethed. Later, I received an email from Klaus. He'd found a survivor willing to testify, but they lived overseas. I replied, offering to help cover costs, but my savings were limited. That evening, I saw Mr. Schmidt burning something in his yard again, and the smoke smelled like old paper. I knew I had to act faster. I planned to visit a local historian who specialized in war records, hoping to find more connections. I wanted to build a case strong enough for the authorities, but leaving the house felt risky now. It cost me my health. My blood pressure spiked, and I hid it from my family. Mr. Schmidt made his move with a letter from a fake community group accusing me of harassment. While driving to the historian's office, my car sputtered and died. Someone had siphoned my gas. I called for a tow, feeling vulnerable, and watched. At the historian's, I learned Mr. Schmidt had donated money to the local museum, cementing his reputation. On the way back, the tow truck driver mentioned, "Your neighbor said you've been having car trouble lately." My blood ran cold. How did he know? I arrived home to find my front door slightly ajar, and I froze on the doorstep. I stood frozen on my doorstep, staring at the slightly ajar door. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pushed it open, fearing what I might find inside. The living room was undisturbed, but a cold draft swept through. Someone had been here. I checked the lock. No forced entry, which meant they had a key. My first thought was Mr. Schmidt, and I felt a surge of anger mixed with terror. I needed to secure my home immediately, but doing so meant admitting how vulnerable I was. I felt my sense of safety vanish. I'd always felt this house was my sanctuary, but now it felt like a trap. Later, I called a locksmith to change all the locks, and while he worked, I noticed Mr. Schmidt watching from his window, a faint smile on his face. As I tidied up, I found a small folded paper wedged under a vase, a drawing of a rose with thorns, similar to the ones he grew. It wasn't a threat, but a reminder he could get in any time. That night, I slept with a chair propped against the door, knowing I had to involve my family before it was too late. I invited my son David over for lunch, planning to tell him everything about Mr. Schmidt. I wanted his support and protection, but revealing the truth meant dragging him into this danger. As we ate, I struggled to find the words, and he noticed my nervousness. "Mum, are you okay? You've been jumpy lately," he said, his concern deepening the guilt I felt. It was emotionally taxing. I hated worrying him, but I couldn't bear the silence anymore. Mr. Schmidt's pressure intensified when David went to leave and found a flat tire on his car. Sabotage, clearly meant to send a message. While waiting for roadside assistance, I finally told David about the photograph and the evidence. He listened, stunned, and promised to help. After he left, I received an email from Klaus. The survivor willing to testify had passed away suddenly. My hope crumbled, but David called later, saying he'd spoken to a friend in the legal field. "We'll get through this, Mum," he assured me, but I hung up, wondering if I'd just put my son in the crosshairs. With David's help, I arranged a meeting with a lawyer specializing in war crimes. I intended to present our evidence and see if we had a case, but I dreaded the legal battles ahead. The meeting was in a quiet office, and the lawyer, Ms. Gable, reviewed the documents carefully. She confirmed the evidence was compelling, but warned that prosecuting someone so old was challenging. Financially, it was a heavy burden. Her fees would drain my savings, but I nodded, determined. As I left, I saw Mr. Schmidt talking to a man in a suit outside the building. He had followed me. Later, at home, David installed a security system, but Mr. Schmidt filed a complaint with the Homeowners Association, claiming the cameras violated privacy rules. That evening, I found a dead rose on my porch. Its stem snapped. It felt like a personal taunt. I called Ms. Gable, and she suggested we gather more witness statements. I spent the night searching online for other survivors' families, my eyes straining in the dim light. Just before dawn, I found a woman in Poland whose mother had been in the same camp. I emailed her, my fingers trembling with a mix of fear and hope. The woman from Poland, Anya, replied quickly. She remembered her mother speaking of Dr. Schmidt and was willing to share her story. I wanted to record her testimony to strengthen our case, but coordinating across time zones and languages was exhausting. I felt the strain in my bones. My arthritis flared up, and I hid it from David. Mr. Schmidt's pressure didn't let up. He started a rumor in the neighborhood that I was suffering from dementia, and suddenly, neighbors avoided me. At the grocery store, one woman patted my arm and said, "Take care of yourself, dear," as if I were fragile. I smiled tightly, seething inside. Later, Anya sent a scanned copy of her mother's diary, pages describing the experiments in detail. Reading them brought back my parents' pain, and I cried alone in my kitchen. That night, my grandson called, asking why I hadn't visited lately. "Are you mad at us, Grandma?" he asked, and my heart broke. I made an excuse, but after hanging up, I realized Mr. Schmidt was isolating me from everyone I loved. I knew I had to act before I lost them all. I decided to confront Mr. Schmidt indirectly by speaking at a neighborhood watch meeting. I wanted to expose his past without naming him, hoping to sway others, but the risk of backlash was high. The meeting was held in the community hall, and I stood up, my voice shaking as I spoke about the importance of knowing our neighbors' histories. Mr. Schmidt was there, seated in the front row, his expression unreadable. Socially, it was costly. After I sat down, people murmured, and some moved away from me. He then stood and gave a smooth speech about forgiveness and moving on, painting me as a troubled old woman. As the meeting ended, he approached me, his voice low. "Eleanor, let this go or your family will pay," he whispered. I froze, fear icing my veins. Later, David called, furious. Someone had slashed the tires on his car again. I knew it was a direct warning. I went to bed that night, clutching my phone, and just as I drifted off, it buzzed with a message from an unknown number, a photo of my granddaughter playing in her yard. I sat up, wide awake, knowing I had no choice but to end this now. I stared at the photo of my granddaughter on my phone, my blood running cold. Mr. Schmidt had crossed a line by involving her, and I knew I had to act fast to keep her safe. I called David immediately, my voice shaking as I told him about the threat. We agreed to pick up Lily from school together and keep her close, but doing so meant revealing the full danger to my son, which terrified me. I lost my peace of mind. I couldn't eat or sleep, jumping at every sound. Mr. Schmidt's pressure continued when I found a dead bird on my porch the next morning, a grim symbol that felt like a warning. Later, while reviewing Anya's mother's diary with David, I noticed a detail I'd missed. Dr. Schmidt had a distinctive ring with an eagle emblem mentioned in the testimony. I remembered seeing that same ring on Mr. Schmidt's finger recently. We photographed it from a distance and sent it to Klaus, who confirmed it matched descriptions from other survivors. That evening, as I tucked Lily into bed at my house, she asked, "Grandma, why is that man always watching us?" I looked out the window and saw Mr. Schmidt's silhouette in his dark living room, staring back. I decided to use the ring as concrete evidence to file a formal report with the local police, hoping it would finally spur action. I wanted to push the authorities to investigate Mr. Schmidt, but I feared they might dismiss it as circumstantial. David and I went to the station, where a detective listened patiently, but warned that without more proof, it was a long shot. The emotional toll was heavy. I felt drained from repeating my parents' painful story, and David's frustration grew. Mr. Schmidt retaliated by having his lawyer send a cease and desist letter accusing me of defamation, which arrived that afternoon. It was a bold move to silence me legally. While discussing it with Ms. Gable, my lawyer, she suggested we contact the Department of Justice's Human Rights Division, as they handle old war crimes cases. I spent the evening gathering all my evidence, photos, diaries, the ring image, into a dossier. Just as I finished, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Stop now, or the next photo won't be so innocent." I deleted it, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling. I knew I had to send the dossier tomorrow, no matter what. I mailed the dossier to the Department of Justice early the next morning, hoping it would reach the right person. I wanted to get federal attention on Mr. Schmidt, but the waiting game was agonizing. I felt isolated, as David had to focus on protecting his family, and I didn't want to burden him further. Mr. Schmidt's pressure intensified when I received a visit from a social worker, prompted by an anonymous call claiming I was a danger to myself. I had to calmly explain the situation, feeling humiliated and violated. After she left, I checked my security camera footage and saw Mr. Schmidt talking to the social worker outside his house before she came to me. It was a clever move to discredit me. Later, Klaus emailed saying he'd found another survivor's relative in Canada who had documents linking Mr. Schmidt to forged identities. I forwarded this to Ms. Gable, feeling a flicker of hope. That night, I woke to the sound of footsteps in my backyard. I peered out the window and saw a shadowy figure near the fence, but when I turned on the light, it was gone. Only a single rose petal lay on the grass, and I knew he was testing my defenses. I started wearing a small recording device whenever I left the house, aiming to catch Mr. Schmidt making a threat directly. I wanted undeniable evidence for the police, but it felt deceitful and added to my constant anxiety. I lost my dignity. I hated feeling like a spy in my own neighborhood. At the grocery store, Mr. Schmidt approached me in the parking lot, his voice friendly, but his eyes cold. "Eleanor, why don't we end this peacefully? I can make it worth your while," he said, implying a bribe. I kept calm and recorded it, but my heart raced. Later, David found that someone had keyed his car while it was parked at work, and he was furious. We reviewed the recording with Ms. Gable, who said it might help, but it wasn't enough for an arrest. That afternoon, I got a call from the Department of Justice. They'd received my dossier and were opening a preliminary review. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. When I returned home, my front door was scratched with the words, "Leave it be." I called the police to report it, but they said it was vandalism with no witnesses. As I cleaned it off, I realized Mr. Schmidt was getting desperate, and desperate men are dangerous. I decided to stay with David and his family for a few days to ensure everyone's safety, wanting to remove myself as a target. I packed a bag, but leaving my home felt like a defeat. It was emotionally draining. I missed my routine and felt like I'd abandoned my parents' memory. Mr. Schmidt must have noticed, because that evening he called David's house, asking to speak to me, to clear the air. David refused, but the call shook me. He knew where I was. The next day, while at David's, I got an email from Klaus. The Canadian relative had sent scanned copies of immigration papers showing Mr. Schmidt's fake identity, and they included a signature from the official who was later convicted for helping war criminals. It was a breakthrough. I forwarded it to the DOJ contact, feeling a surge of hope. But that night, as I looked out David's window, I saw a car idling across the street. Mr. Schmidt's sedan. It drove away slowly, but not before the driver's window rolled down and he waved, a chilling gesture that said he was always watching. I knew then that this wouldn't end until one of us was exposed for good. I woke up at David's house with a resolve to end this standoff once and for all. Seeing Mr. Schmidt wave from his car last night had chilled me to the bone, and I knew I couldn't hide forever. I decided to reach out to the DOJ contact again, hoping to expedite their review with the new evidence from Klaus. But doing so meant drawing more attention to myself, and I worried about putting David's family in greater danger. I lost my peace of mind. I barely slept, and every creak in the house made me jump. Mr. Schmidt applied pressure by sending a formal letter to David's Homeowners Association, complaining about unauthorized guests and hinting at lease violations, a petty move to force me out. Later that day, while checking my email, I found a message from the DOJ. They had assigned an investigator and wanted to interview me next week. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. As I read the details, my phone rang. It was Mr. Schmidt's number. I let it go to voicemail, and his message was calm but firm. Eleanor, we need to talk before you do something you'll regret. I deleted it, but my hands shook. That evening, David found a note tucked under his windshield wiper. Family should be protected. It wasn't signed, but we both knew who it was from. I went to bed clutching my phone, wondering if I was making things worse for everyone I loved. I met with Ms. Gable to prepare for the DOJ interview, aiming to present my evidence clearly and convincingly. I wanted to ensure that Mr. Schmidt would finally face justice, but the process felt overwhelming for someone my age. The emotional toll was heavy. Recounting my parents' suffering left me drained, and I had to take breaks to compose myself. Mr. Schmidt's pressure didn't let up. He showed up at the same cafe where we were meeting, sitting a few tables away and watching us over his newspaper. Ms. Gable noticed and suggested we leave, but not before he approached and said, Eleanor, you look tired. Perhaps you should rest more. His condescending tone made my blood boil. After he left, Ms. Gable advised me to avoid any contact and let the authorities handle it. Back at David's, I reviewed the evidence files, and I noticed something odd in the scanned immigration papers. A reference to a storage unit in a nearby city under Mr. Schmidt's fake name. I emailed Klaus about it immediately, hoping it might lead to more proof. That night, I received a text from an unknown number, a photo of the storage facility's address. It felt like a trap, but I knew I had to check it out. I decided to visit the storage facility with David, hoping to find concrete evidence linking Mr. Schmidt to his past. I wanted to secure anything that could strengthen the DOJ's case, but the risk of confrontation terrified me. David insisted on coming, which eased my mind but added to my guilt. He was missing work and risking his safety. It strained our relationship. He was growing impatient with the stress, and we argued over the best approach. Mr. Schmidt must have been tracking us, because as we drove to the facility, his car appeared in our rearview mirror, following at a distance. David tried to lose him, but he stayed close until we pulled into the storage lot. We found the unit number from the papers, but it was locked tight. As we debated what to do, a facility manager approached, saying someone had reported us for trespassing. We showed ID and explained, but he was suspicious. Just then, my phone buzzed. A message from Mr. Schmidt. Some secrets are better left buried. We left empty-handed, but on the way back, David noticed that the lock on the unit had been recently changed. It was a clear sign that Mr. Schmidt was one step ahead. The DOJ investigator, Agent Miller, called to schedule our interview for the following day at a local federal building. I wanted to make sure I was calm and collected, but the anticipation made me anxious. I spent the evening rehearsing what to say, with David helping me stay focused. The emotional strain was intense. I felt like I was reliving my parents' trauma with every detail I recalled. Mr. Schmidt applied pressure by having a delivery sent to David's house, a bouquet of black roses with a card that read, "Thinking of you." It was a sinister gesture that shook us all. Later, I checked my security camera feed from my own house and saw Mr. Schmidt walking around my property, peering into windows. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. Agent Miller emailed to confirm the interview time and mentioned they had received additional documents from Klaus, including the storage unit lead. He said they were taking it seriously. That night, as I tried to sleep, I heard a noise outside David's window. I looked out and saw a shadowy figure placing something on the porch. I woke David, and we found a small sealed box. We didn't open it. Instead, we called the police to report it. As we waited, I wondered what was inside and if this was Mr. Schmidt's final warning. The day of the DOJ interview arrived, and I dressed carefully, wanting to appear credible and strong. David drove me to the federal building, and I focused on staying calm during the questioning. Agent Miller was professional and listened intently as I laid out the evidence: the photograph, the diary entries, the ring, and the immigration papers. I felt a sense of purpose, but it drained my energy. I was exhausted by the end, and my hands trembled as I signed the statement. Mr. Schmidt's pressure escalated when, during the interview, David received a call from his wife. Lily had come home from school upset because a man had approached her at the bus stop and asked about her grandma. She couldn't identify him, but we knew who it was. Agent Miller took note and said they would look into it. After the interview, as we walked to the car, I saw Mr. Schmidt's sedan parked across the street. He didn't move, just watched us. Back at David's, I had a message from Ms. Gable. The DOJ was considering a search warrant for Mr. Schmidt's home based on my testimony. It felt like a victory. But that evening, my phone rang with a blocked number. I answered, and Mr. Schmidt's voice was cold and direct. "You've made a mistake, Eleanor. I have something you'll want back." He hung up, and minutes later, David discovered that Lily's favorite stuffed animal, which she'd left at my house weeks ago, was now on his doorstep, torn and dirty. I knew then that he was targeting what I loved most. Seeing Lily's torn, stuffed animal on David's doorstep made my stomach clench. Mr. Schmidt had moved from threats to attacking what my granddaughter loved, and I couldn't let that stand. I needed to get the DOJ to act on the search warrant immediately before he escalated further. I called Agent Miller from David's kitchen, my voice unsteady as I described the incident. But he said the warrant was still being processed and might take another day. The delay cost me my composure. I snapped at David when he suggested we stay elsewhere, and I saw the hurt in his eyes. Mr. Schmidt filed a harassment complaint against me with the local police, claiming I was stalking him. A clever reversal that made me look unstable. While waiting for news, I checked my home security feed and saw him loading boxes into his car late at night, as if preparing to flee. I forwarded the footage to Agent Miller, hoping it would speed things up. Just as I hung up, David rushed in, his face pale. "Mum, Lily's school called. A man tried to pick her up early, claiming to be her grandfather. They stopped him, but he got away." My blood ran cold. Mr. Schmidt was getting brazen, and I knew we were running out of time. I insisted on staying at my own house so that Mr. Schmidt would focus on me instead of David's family. David argued against it, but I packed a bag and drove home, my hands gripping the wheel tightly. It felt like a betrayal of my own safety. I lay awake that night, listening for every sound, my heart pounding at shadows. Mr. Schmidt kept calling my landline silently, each call hanging up after a few seconds, a way to wear me down. The next morning, Agent Miller called. The search warrant was approved and would be executed that afternoon. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. As I watched from my window, two unmarked cars pulled up to Mr. Schmidt's house, and agents knocked on his door. He answered calmly, but as they entered, I saw him glance toward my house, his expression icy. Later, Agent Miller updated me. They'd found some documents and a locked safe, but Mr. Schmidt was cooperating and hadn't been arrested. Then, Miller mentioned they'd seized his computer and found encrypted files. "We'll need time to analyze them," he said. After the call, I noticed Mr. Schmidt standing at his window, staring directly at me. He raised his hand slowly, pointing a finger like a gun, and my breath caught. He wasn't finished yet. With the DOJ investigation underway, I focused on supporting the case by organizing all my evidence into a timeline for Agent Miller. I wanted to ensure nothing was overlooked, but the process dragged up painful memories of my parents' stories, leaving me emotionally raw. David helped me sort through papers, but the tension between us grew. He worried I was obsessing and neglecting my health. Mr. Schmidt retaliated by having his lawyer send a defamation lawsuit threat to me and David, demanding we retract our statements or face court. It was a bold move to intimidate us financially. While reviewing the documents, I found an old letter from my mother mentioning a locket she hid with a photo of her and my father, one I'd never found. On a hunch, I searched my attic and discovered it taped inside a dusty jewelry box. Inside was a tiny picture of them, and on the back, a handwritten date and camp number that matched Mr. Schmidt's records. I photographed it and sent it to Agent Miller, feeling a surge of vindication. That evening, my doorbell rang, and through the peephole, I saw Mr. Schmidt holding a single white rose. He left it on the step and walked away, but when I checked it later, a note was tied to the stem. "Some truths should die with the guilty." I locked the door, my hands trembling, wondering if he was planning something final. The encrypted files from Mr. Schmidt's computer were cracked, revealing detailed logs of his experiments and a list of victims, including my parents' names. Agent Miller called to say they had enough to arrest him, but they needed to locate him first. He'd disappeared from his home overnight. I wanted to feel relief, but instead, I was terrified he'd come for me, or my family. David moved me back to his house, and we increased security, but the fear cost me my sleep. I jumped at every noise, and my blood pressure medication needed adjustment. Mr. Schmidt's actions became more sinister when David's wife found a typed note in their mailbox. "You should have left the past buried." It was unsigned, but the threat was clear. Later, Agent Miller called again. They'd tracked Mr. Schmidt to a motel in a nearby town and were moving in to arrest him. I sat by the phone, waiting for news, my stomach in knots. Hours passed, and finally Miller called back. They had him in custody. He'd gone quietly, but in his room, they found a handwritten letter addressed to me. Miller read it over the phone. "Eleanor, you win. But remember, some wounds never heal." I hung up, feeling no victory, only a hollow ache. That night, I dreamed of my parents, and for the first time, they were smiling. The weeks after Mr. Schmidt's arrest were quiet, but the peace felt fragile. I moved back into my house, slowly reclaiming the spaces he had violated. I wanted to find a way to live without the shadow of his presence, to honor my parents without being consumed by their pain. David and I repaired our relationship. He helped me plant new flowers in the garden, replacing the roses Mr. Schmidt had grown. I had to acknowledge the years I'd spent holding on to anger, and I started seeing a counselor to talk it through. One afternoon, Agent Miller visited to update me. Mr. Schmidt was being extradited to Germany to face trial, and my evidence was key. He thanked me for my courage, and I felt a weight lift. I invited my family over for dinner, and as we sat around the table, Lily handed me a drawing she'd made, a picture of me with a crown, labelled Brave Grandma. I framed it and hung it in the living room. Now, I tend my garden, volunteer at the local library, and tell my grandchildren stories of their great-grandparents' resilience. The past isn't forgotten, but it no longer controls me. I sit on my porch in the evenings, watching the sunset, and feel a quiet contentment settle in my soul.